Hello, everyone. Today I have a brand new and very special guest, Mark Yaxley, who is a managing director at Strategic Wealth Preservation, and that is a bullion dealer and storage provider based in Grand Cayman. Can I just say this is a very strange intro because I will never forget my cruise ship contracts experience from Grand Cayman. So I've been there so many times and I absolutely abused the rum cake in the souvenir stores, abused this. So I already have a very good feeling about this place. But Mark, first of all, I welcome you to my channel and I'm so thankful for you finding time and connecting with me. I came across you through Stanberry Research with Daniela Cambone, and I follow her lately, especially more often. So your knowledge, your experience, and the value of breaking down to someone who is barely in the beginning of investing in gold and silver, especially in this current reality, it's very, very important. So welcome. Thank you for finding time.
Well, Anya, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and thanks for having me. And I have a soft spot for rum cakes too, so I share in your addiction to rum cake.
Yeah, they actually can make you drunk, right? Because there's quite a lot of rum in them.
There's a lot of things in Grand Cayman that can make you drunk, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, let's start with this, which you actually, in one of the last videos with Daniela, about this myth. There is this myth that only rich people own gold and silver. And I want to start with this.
Sure. I mean, speaking from experience, I've worked at all, you could say all levels or sizes of companies within the precious metals business, starting with Kitco, where I started my career. I spent 7 years there. That was one of the largest precious metal dealers in the world. So I had a lot of exposure. We had, hundreds of thousands of clients. I've worked in street level precious metal dealers, where you really have a brick and mortar store where you have clients walking in and transacting with you, and obviously SWP of late. But, I've dealt with clients and you have all shapes and sizes, as young as 16 years old, and as elderly as 90 years old, as wealthy as, tens of millions of dollars invested, and as small as 1 ounce of silver invested. So, that myth, it really is unfortunate. I think that's just the media's perception of who controls or who owns gold and silver, but it's pretty misleading, because really anyone can afford a single ounce of silver at $23 plus the premium for the physical product. So there should be no excuse, I guess, in terms of entering the gold and silver market from a wealth or price perspective.
Yes, thank you. And I was one of those people a little bit more than a year ago when I absolutely had no idea how to even buy gold and silver. I'm not a financial expert. I wasn't savvy with this. And I remember Robert Kiyosaki or Kim Kiyosaki always saying, this is God's money, this is God's money, buy gold and silver. And I was like, yeah, right, it's important. I never knew how to do it. And it's actually quite simple. So if you can explain to someone who still hasn't purchased at all, for example, how easy it is to buy, and what would you suggest to buy? Coins? I know it's a complex question, but coins, bars, rounds, what is the best?
Sure. There's quite a bit of ground to cover, but we have some time, so we can go through that. And I sincerely agree with your observation that it is actually one of the simplest forms of investing that exists. I think that's probably the second biggest myth, is that somehow it's complicated to buy gold and silver. It's actually very, very simple. You don't have to pick. Like when you invest in stocks, for example, you have to pick the right company. You have to make sure that you're being wise in your selections, whether it be in the tech sector, whether it be in the pharmaceutical sector or the mining sector. With gold and silver, it's really easy. You only have really 5 choices. You have gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and rhodium. That's it for precious metals. And most people will really focus on gold and silver. So you narrow it down quite a bit. So it removes a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the research, I guess you could say, in that sense. You're more focused on investing the correct amount of money, that percentage of your overall investment portfolio. So that's one decision that you'll have to make. Now you can start small with, just a a trial purchase from a new dealer or your local coin dealer. And we'll come back to that in a second. But one of the things that you have to decide, obviously, is how much money you're going to invest. And that can be a very simple calculation where you look at your overall investment portfolio and you simply take a percentage of that overall portfolio, say it's 10 or 20%, that you're going to allocate towards precious metals. And once you have that number in mind, you can start the journey of where do I buy it from? What products am I buying? What metals am I buying? And those are things that we can certainly talk about.
Thank you, Mark. So can I ask you in that topic, let's use a round number. Someone has, for example, $100,000. And what would you suggest how to break it down as far as investing?
Right. Okay. So if you've determined the amount of money that you'd like to invest in precious metals, that being an important first step, the next thing that you're really going to want to do before you get to the product selection is do your research on finding a reputable precious metal dealer or dealers, maybe 2 or 3, so you can compare them against one another. And you can find reputable dealers online, obviously, by doing research and finding good online reviews, making sure that the companies have been around in the industry for a while, or just speaking to someone like yourself who's had a positive experience and knows where to buy precious metals from. Or if you're lucky, if you live in a big city, you'll probably have physical brick and mortar precious metal dealers in your city. And then you can physically go to these places and have a conversation with a human being, which is always important to build that trust and relationship with them. But once you've selected your precious metal dealer, the next thing that you're going to want to think about, Anya, is the type of metals that you're going to invest in. And this can be a little bit perplexing for new investors. They're like, well, is it better to invest in gold or silver or platinum group metals? And I usually say for a first-time buyer, maybe not using your entire $100,000, but your first purchase, you might want to keep it simple and just purchase one metal type. Just kind of focus your exercise on one particular metal to go through that experience yourself. So if you're going to make your very first purchase, I'd say start with gold. That's kind of the core cornerstone of any precious metals portfolio. Gold has outperformed silver over the long term. It's also the most recognized and liquid metal of all the precious metals. You could bring your gold to Singapore and sell it there. You could bring it anywhere in the world to Europe and sell it there. So start with your gold purchase, but beyond that, you are going to want to consider diversifying your precious metals portfolio. The concept of diversity, not only in your overall investment portfolio where you're including precious metals to act as a hedge, but also amongst the precious metals, because gold, silver, and the platinum group metals all have different market attributes. Are all used in different industrial applications. So they do perform at times slightly different one from the other. So it's important that you benefit from that diversity as well. So I'd say if you're $100,000, get yourself some gold. Maybe that's like 60% of your portfolio. You'd want to add some silver to that, maybe 25, 30% of your portfolio. Silver is more volatile than gold in a good market and also more volatile in a bad market. And then round out that $100,000 with some platinum group metals, maybe palladium, for example, which is used in the production of catalytic converters for automobiles. And that's had a really good track record over the last few years. So, and then you're well diversified in your metal allocation.
Thank you so much for this, Mark. So now let's go into coins or bars. And if so, before I will let you answer this, I want to mention this because I was recently in Poland and my elder father had some savings and I knew that I have to act now before it's too late, before, the money will lose completely its value. So I have to put this into gold or silver. Actually, in Poland, makes no sense to buy silver because there's 23% of VAT on the top of it.
Correct, yeah.
So what I did, I put some portion of it, not big, but still, into gold. And my question to you is this. There are certain brands, like for example, it's called Schaffner. I think it's German. It's in Poland, they sell it. And those two, like Pump, I think it's Swiss, and Valcambi, I believe. I don't know how you pronounce. Those are quite popular. The Schaffner was the cheapest, but it was still the same amount of gold as the other ones. So could you explain the difference, if the brand matters and if it's better to invest in bars or coins or rounds?
Sure. Actually, that's a really, really good question and a very common question from investors. And the simple answer is, does brand matter? Yes, it does. It does matter even though the gold coins or bars that you were looking at in Poland have the same quantity of pure metal, some of those brands carry a higher premium above the spot price when you purchase them. So they're more expensive by a few dollars. You're not talking a huge amount of money, but by a small fraction of a percent. And the reason is because those brands, Pamp Swiss and Valcambi, are a globally recognized brand. So whether that Pamp bar was to remain in Poland, or whether it came to the United States, or whether it went to Singapore or another market, it could be sold at just about the same price in any marketplace because the brand is recognized worldwide. It's like owning a car that's manufactured by Ford Motor Company versus a smaller European brand, for example, that some people may not have heard of. So brand does matter, and typically you pay a little bit more for the brand because it has better liquidity worldwide. But to that same point, if you're intending to stay in Poland and those bars are staying in a local marketplace, and that I think you said Schäfer or Schaffer brand is
I think it's German, yeah.
Is a German refinery, if it's recognized in that local marketplace as equal to the Pamp or the Valcambi, then yes, if you can purchase that gold at a slightly discount premium and still sell it back for the same amount of money, then that's actually a very good purchase for you because you've saved a few dollars, means you can buy more gold with your money.
Yes. And you mentioned this in pretty much every interview when you ask about it, that Canadian maple coin, right, is about, actually it's cheaper than American Eagle and has the same percentage of gold or silver, right? So
yes.
Why do you think people still buy American Eagle if they can have actually the same value as they have with Canadian Eagle maple?
Very good. That's a good question, actually. I think I mean, look, there's some bias, being a Canadian, you would tend to be proud of the fact that you can purchase your own national mints products. In the United States, that's certainly true. A lot of American investors will pay additional premium for gold eagles or silver eagles. But when you look at it from simply an investment point of view, if you removed all the emotional aspects, the pride involved in these decisions, typically you would want to find the coin, whether it be the Royal Canadian Mint or the Austrian Mint or the Perth Mint of Australia, whichever coin has the smallest total spread, the cost to buy the coin and then what you're going to get when you sell it, the tightest total spread, that's really the best investment option, for you, as long as you have liquidity with that product in your market where you intend to sell it later on. Now, if you're dealing with a reputable vault like ours, or a precious metal dealer that makes an active buying and selling market, that's not an issue for you. You don't really have to worry about the liquidity aspect. You have the liquidity that you need. But to answer your question, I think that boils down to pride, but people do look at the total spread as well. So if they feel their total spread is better with Eagles, then some of them will buy Eagles, others will buy Maples. But it's a very good question.
Thank you, because you can trade it as easily. It can be liquid as easily as American Eagle, I understand. If you travel, exactly. Right, it's no issue with this. So Mark, for example, now I didn't have this question written down, but it came to me now. When people go even on your website or other companies' website and they see to purchase gold, for example, because there are many people in this position when they cannot afford to spend almost $2,000 for 1 ounce. I know it fluctuates, but still it's gonna go even higher. So this is actually pretty low, I think. But then there are options of gold, 1 ounce of gold that is kind of cut into very small, tiny little bars. And of course, that is more expensive. Mm-hmm. But do you think that is a smart move to do for someone who, for example, travels, or I don't know, like doesn't want to sell the whole ounce and has this very tiny one? Or you would rather suggest people buy this completely separate in a different size?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the combi, like the Valcambi combi bars, which exactly, yeah. Well, you're right. First of all, when you get into fractional products or combi bar products that are those series of bars that are kind of all stuck together in one unit, the premium is going to be higher. So you are going to pay there's going to be an additional cost to purchase that product versus a 1 ounce gold bar or a 1 ounce gold coin. So that's the first thing you need to consider, is the convenience factor for you, the investor, to have these smaller fractional amounts. Is it worth the extra percentages you're going to pay? Personally, my personal opinion, having sold these products for quite a long time, I would say it's more worth your while to save your money and be able to afford a 1 ounce gold product, because you will save several percentage points. And even if you're working on a relatively small budget, if you do that, even if you're buying 1 ounce a year, if you did that year after year after year, you would end up saving enough money to then purchase probably 1 or 2 additional ounces over that period of time. So I think my mentor taught me, the more ounces you can buy, the better. That's really, you're in a better position financially with the more gold and silver that you hold in your portfolio versus necessarily having this convenience factor with fractional products. But that being said, if all you can afford is a 1/4 ounce of gold or a 1/2 ounce of gold, by all means, I recommend you have some in your portfolio instead of none. That really is important. And you always have the option of silver as well. If you're working on a smaller budget, you can still go out and buy $500 worth of silver. For example, you get 20 ounces of silver, which is a nice start for any portfolio.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So now let's talk about this. When we already have this gold and silver, how do we store it? And Mark knows, because I use Money Metals Exchange as my place where I buy from in United States so far. And actually I stored with them. However, Mark actually brought very good point that if you're considering to store outside United States, which is pretty popular now, and I would say another question was connected to it about confiscation. Well, who knows where this is all going, right? I mean, ultimately, I feel it's going to a good place, but we will go through some major hardship along the way. I think that considering to store outside US, it's a very, very smart move. So let's talk about, we have it in our hands, what we do with it, how we keep it safe.
I think it's really, Anya, a question of how much you have in your hands. For full disclosure, I think it's a great idea to store some of your precious metals at home, close by. I keep $2,000 worth of precious metals in my home, just to make sure that if worst case scenario, I had something that I could barter or exchange. If I ran out of cash, for example, then the next best thing would probably be precious metals, or if cash is worthless, obviously, I have my digital assets, and I have a little bit of gold and silver as well. But you can only keep so much at home, because one, your home insurance, generally, they have a problem with gold and silver. It seems to be one of those items they don't like to insure. So you'd have to check with your home insurance provider to see if it's something they will insure. In most cases, from experience, it's not something that they like to insure. So a lot of people end up putting it in a safe deposit box in a local bank, which is generally a safe place, but it is within a bank. It's within a financial institution, and it's uninsured in those safe deposit boxes. Banks don't provide insurance on items in safe deposit boxes. In a lot of cases, they don't really like having gold and silver in there as well. They feel like it puts them in some sort of regulatory or just physical risk position. So some banks are actually pushing gold and silver clients out of the door these days. But if you get to the point where it's too much to have at home and you're not comfortable putting in a safe deposit box in the bank, or it's too much for a safe deposit box in the bank, then you look at third-party storage like you do domestically in the United States. You're having it stored in a physical vault that's built for precious metal storage, and also that offers you the two-way liquidity to buy and sell precious metals without you having them in your hands any longer. And really, the conversation goes from domestic to offshore. If you're not comfortable with the country that you live in, Canada and the United States are relatively stable countries compared to some second and third world countries. But if you're not comfortable, either for a physical reason, for a political reason, for confiscation, for privacy is a big one for a lot of people. They don't want their information, Big Brother getting their hands on the information. Then they start looking at offshore jurisdictions like the Cayman Islands, where we're based, or Singapore, where we offer storage, or even Liechtenstein in Europe.
Yes, fantastic country. I've drove.
I'm sure you're familiar with.
So tiny, like it barely exists.
It's beautiful though. I know I've been there several times. I really enjoy Liechtenstein as well.
Yes.
But there are these offshore jurisdictions that maybe are safer places, especially in terms of privacy for investors.
Mark, is there like a minimum to store with you in your storage in Grand Caymans?
We don't have a minimum physical, like there's no physical number of ounces that you have to hold. We have an annual minimum fee of $200 to store with us. That includes the storage, the insurance, the physical audit that's conducted by a third party, and all of your statements and customer service. So $200. I mean, if you have, I think we recommend to people if you have $20,000 to $25,000, that kind of puts you at the minimum threshold. So it's probably worth your while. Anything less than that, you might want to consider either a domestic option or a safe deposit box locally. But once you get to that $20,000, $25,000 amount, I think it's worthwhile to consider SWP.
Yes. So now I have this question since I was started listening to you actually, because I went through several interviews with you. I was thinking, what happens if, of course, this is like, we don't want that. But if there's like a storm or hurricane and something happens to that facility in Grand Cayman, how is this insured for the clients?
Well, that's a good question. That's the first question I asked when I started the company with my partners, because I grew up in Canada. We don't have hurricanes and major floods really here, not like they do in the Caribbean. So I asked the same question. And first of all, and this is the most important thing when you talk about any storage facility, is the underlying insurance. The facility in Grand Cayman is insured by Marsh and Lloyd's of London, which are two companies that specialize in precious metals insurance. And we're insured for all types of natural disasters, including flooding, hurricane, but also things like fire and theft and infidelity, which is if an employee decided to take something. So the company is insured against all of those types of losses. And another nice thing to keep in mind, and I don't tend to say this to clients, but when you think about a flood, metal doesn't disappear in a flood. It actually is very heavy. And the way that we store it inside the vault, which is airtight, there might be some flooding, but it's not enough to carry away the metals. It's inside a class 3 vault, inside a bunker of a building. So if anything, the metal might become wet, but it doesn't float away. It's not damaged per se by water. So it's not as concerning as it might appear on the top level. But the building itself also, Anya, is a category 5 hurricane rated building. So it was built to withstand the strongest hurricanes that you would see in the Caribbean.
Wow, thank you. That's really cool. I saw like the treasure hunt movies right away. Yeah. Okay, so now as far as confiscation, you had this conversation with someone as well on YouTube. And you mentioned something very, very important, that you don't really think that the government, I'm talking US here now, will come after the money. Well, they are going after guns now, I think, that's first. Who knows if they go after gold and silver, but if they go after something, they will go after 401ks, all of those things that with one touch of the button can be transferred whatever they want to. So that brings me to my question about 401ks and confiscation. What do you think, Mark?
Exactly. So, when people talk about gold and silver confiscation, that argument generally starts with the precedent that was set during the Great Depression era, when the US government was desperate for money and they confiscated or exchanged cash for gold and silver. You have to keep in mind that at that point in history, physical gold and silver accounted for like 30% of the economy and total value, right? So it was very predominant at that point in time. People still got paid in gold coins during that period of time. The banks, had to store gold reserves to offset the money that currency that they were putting on the street, and that people were borrowing. So it was a much more predominant part of our global economy, not only in the United States, but the global economy. I mean, the whole gold standard was still in effect during that period of time. You fast forward 80 years or 90 years now from the Great Depression, and gold plays a relatively minor role in the global economy. It makes up less than 3% now of kind of the whole picture. There's a lot more money, obviously, in the stock market, bond market, paper products, ETFs. And so I think personally, because it plays such a less important role now, I don't think the government would be nearly as motivated to confiscate gold because it makes up such a small part of the global economy. But also, like you said, for the sake of ease, if they wanted to seize assets, if they desperately needed cash, where is that cash? It's in the financial
They
system.
go into crypto, right? They go
Well,
into yeah.
Now you have crypto in the argument. Yeah, so that's another thing. You've got the crypto assets, which is a fastest growing asset class. You've got the banks, which that financial system, all that reporting that goes to the government, all that information is readily available to the government. And then you have obviously pension plans, registered pension plans, the 401ks, the IRA accounts, all of that registered money. The government knows exactly where it is and they know how to get to it and they know how much it is, more importantly. So my theory personally is that that would be their first stop, and that gold and silver, physical gold and silver particularly, is way down the list of assets they would try to seize. But I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying in all likelihood, it's less likely than it was 90 years ago for sure.
It's such a good point. So now let me ask you, this is maybe quite controversial, but I want to address it here. What if next year we're going to see in the United States, because the whole world is watching what's happening here, they're going to reverse the results of the election. Let's just say hypothetically, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. What do you think is going to happen to precious metals with that?
That's a really good question, actually. I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking through, even if they didn't reverse the election results, if the Republicans are reelected, if Trump happens to be the front man at the time, or if it's another Republican, it's a pretty big shift. They're, obviously in political. I can tell you what happened when Trump was elected the first time to precious metals. Everyone in the industry thought that if Donald Trump were to be elected, that there would be a huge rise in the price of gold and silver, because we knew he was a very volatile person, that he intended to change U.S. policy in a lot of ways, to deregulate, to change his foreign policies, how he dealt with other countries, how the United States traded with other countries. So we said, when this guy gets in, it's going to upset the whole world, and gold and silver are going to go up as a result. But actually, the exact opposite thing happened. When Trump was elected, the gold and silver market became quite quiet. And one of my clients, who was a Republican, explained to me that he said, look, we were worried that if the Democrats got in, that everything would go to hell and we would be buying a lot of gold and silver to hedge against what the Democrats were going to do. They were going to raise taxes, they were going to regulate more. These wealthy Republican Americans were concerned about the impact it would have on their lives. But in fact, it was kind of the opposite. When Trump got elected, they said, we're good. Our guy's in government and he's going to side with us on a lot of these issues that are concerning to us. So it was kind of an interesting outcome. I don't know if it'll be the same in the next election, or if they reverse the results, but that's what happened when Trump was elected the first time.
Mark, may I ask you one more question?
Sure, of course.
Now, in every crisis, and we are living in this crisis right now, this is not like temporary inflation, this is like skyrocketing inflation. It's not going to be like we wake up one morning and everything is reversed. All of a sudden we see like, oh yeah, it's a growing economy, it's booming, it's fantastic. No, it's actually heading somewhere. So it's heading like it's almost going to crash to the wall. That's how I see it. It's going to smash. What happens with this for gold and silver? Because we cannot really fully compare it to what happened in 1930s or what happened in 2008. I mean, to some extent we can, but I don't think we really have an idea of the scale of this event. But something's gonna happen to gold and silver. It will grow up right away, or it will go gradually. What do you think is gonna be? That's why it's so important now to protect yourself, because before all of this completely is destroyed.
Yeah. So first of all, you're right. Every financial crisis has its own unique causes and attributes. Obviously, there are some commonalities between each, but for example, 2008 was a credit crisis and a housing bubble. Kind of those two issues together really caused a massive decline in equity values. And gold and silver, to answer your question, what happened during that crisis is initially everything goes down because the
Yep.
whole market is scrambling for liquidity. They're scrambling to go into cash to protect themselves so that they're not taking massive losses in holding positions.
Mhm.
And then gold and silver went on magnificent bull runs, the best I've seen in my career. Gold went up 140% in 3 years, and silver went up 380% in a 3-year period. So it was really, once in a decade, once in a 2-decade occurrence for gold and silver. But initially, you do have a sharp decline in gold and silver. And then in 2020, which was a government mandated financial crisis, it was the lockdown crisis because of COVID, we saw the same behavior where everything sold off in March as the lockdowns began, as the global economy and the supply chains all became shut down because the government thought that was the best course of action. Not to say it wasn't, but just saying that's what they decided to do. There was an initial pullback and then a very strong bull run, 37% for gold within 3 months, and silver was up about 80% during the same period of time. So generally speaking, the way that gold and silver behave is when it's not crisis, it's flat or a slightly downward trend. And in a crisis, it's a strong upward trend. So the lesson for investors to prepare is when we're in a pre-crisis situation like we are now, where we see inflation, we see COVID. Just today, they announced there's a new variant of COVID. The stock markets are down 2%. The world is reacting to this news. When all these things are building up, this is a time you want to be buying. You want to be preparing yourself, getting your gold and silver at a slightly discounted price and premiums before that next crisis. When, like you said, when we hit the wall, it's too late. Then you're racing.
Yeah.
You're racing to the door to buy gold and silver at a higher price.
Thank you so much. And I forgot completely one of the most important questions.
Sure.
Let's say we have certain amount of gold with us in the bars, and we are flying to US. From Poland. Let's use my country, my homeland country. What happens to us at the border? Because I know $10,000, which is like, what's the amount now? It's like ridiculous. You have to declare. We have to declare this bar. And what happens to the bar?
I can tell you because I've traveled into the United States, out of the United States, into Canada, out of Canada, into Grand Cayman, out all the time with gold and silver. I've traveled from Germany. I lived in Germany for 2 years. I've done the Europe, US thing. I've done it all. So this is there's really two important things here. Number one, gold and silver are considered under the law as personal property. So the way that the law treats your physical gold and silver is the same way that they treat your watch or the jewelry around your neck. It's your property. It's not, no one else in the whole world has title to that gold and silver. It's yours. It belongs to you. So that's the first thing that's important to know. Secondly, is when you enter a foreign country and they ask you to declare anything above a certain amount, like the United States, $10,000. It does not mean that you can't have more than $10,000. You could have $20,000 worth of cash. You could have $1 million worth of gold in your briefcase or your travel bag. That is perfectly legal. The only thing you have to do is declare it. If you don't declare it, you're breaking the law. If you do declare it, you're complying with the law. And what's going to happen is you're likely going to go into a secondary search. So when you go to the customs agent, they're going to look at your form. They're going to say, Anya, you declared more than 10,000. You're going to go speak to someone in the back. Don't panic. It doesn't mean they're taking your gold. They have no title, no right to take your gold.
For sure.
You will go in the back. It's your personal property. Remember that. So you go in the back and they're going to ask you a series of questions. Where's it coming from? Why do you have it? Why are you bringing it to the United States? What they're looking for is terrorist financing, money laundering. Those are the types of things that they're screening for. Gold and silver are not taxable items in the United States. There's no VAT on them. So they're not there to collect any money from you. The only thing they might ask you to do is fill out a secondary form saying why you have it and why are you bringing it to the United States. That's really what they're concerned about. I've done it myself many times. They have never taken my gold or silver. They've treated me with respect. As long as I was respectful towards them, they always treated me with respect as well. And yes, it delays you by 30 minutes, an hour, but you're on your way and you're free to go. That's the one thing you have to think of: time and stress. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed by the situation and just know it's going to add some time to your journey.
Thank you, Mark. This is so important to know because I know that people are sometimes in this situation when this is the way now. It will be the way for many people to transport, gold or silver. But thank you for today so much. The contact to your company will be down below. So if anyone is interested, they can purchase from your website, they can store with you, they can also sell it to you if they choose so, right?
That's right. Yes, we do offer liquidity in the vaults and the storage vaults, and we deliver to home addresses as well.
Amazing. And clients are from all around the world. So I have audience from Europe and US and Canada and everywhere. So please check it out, everyone. Thank you so much for today. And maybe we have another conversation soon. Thank you.
Happy to be here, Anya. And yes, happy to educate your followers anytime you'd like to have me back.
Thank you.